But I said this exact same thing last week.
You did.
This exact same
And
thing.
now you have validation.
Yeah, and listen, there could be 20 other people that say, opposite of what myself and this Derek is saying. But I do feel this to be true. I think we are creatures of the moment, or prisoners of the moment. And sometimes we are just looking at what is now as opposed to, the whole. If Cam Ward, and I said this the last time, if Cam Ward had the same season he had this year, last year, and came out, he would have been amongst those guys in the top of the draft. There would have been people that would have drafted him higher than J.J. McCarthy. Minnesota may have taken him higher than J.J. McCarthy. Denver may have taken him over Bo Nix. So, because we got to understand, they didn't think they didn't have Bo Nix or J.J. McCarthy in the top 10. A lot of people, all these pundits and everybody's talking about, that was such a superb class. They didn't have Michael Penix going where he went. They didn't have a Bo Nix going where he went. There was 3 guys that we were, consistently talking about: Drake May, Caleb Williams, and Daniels. That's it. And then those other guys were like, yeah, these are first-round guys, but they are nowhere near these guys. And then all of a sudden, we see a Bo Nix, a Michael Penix, a J.J. McCarthy, and then they play well during the season. And then now it's, oh, look at that class from last year. Oh, my goodness, that's a great class. We are creatures of the moment. We captured that one moment right then and there, and it affects how we think moving forward. Had this draft had Jackson Dart been more consistent, had Milroe been more consistent, because these are the guys that we were talking about, Ewers of Texas. If those guys had been more consistent,
Carson Beck had such a rough college season, he went back to college.
Exactly. But these were the guys that they were talking about the year prior. They would be high draft picks.
Right.
Now they're just completely off the board. Yep. So again, I think Cam Ward is getting docked because of the draft as a whole. If this was a better draft, if there was more competition for that number 1 pick amongst quarterbacks, we would be talking a whole, even if there was 2 other guys, and I'm not talking about, 5 or 6. I'm just saying, if it was Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart, or somebody else closer to Cam Ward, you can really give an argument for that number 1 pick, this would be a different conversation.
I really caught my attention, the reference point of where,
and throw Richardson exactly in there as well.
Where exactly Ward fell. I thought it was interesting to say that they think that Ward is a better prospect than Penix, McCarthy, and Nix. That's enticing, I think, even though it comes down to, again, one of my questions that I've repeated over and over during this process, and that is, it's clear that Ward is a first-round pick caliber, but is he worthy of the first pick? That's what the Titans have to decide. And even if he's not, is their need for a quarterback still good enough, and you like him enough that you're willing to take him at 1, even if he's not that elite player that you, in your grand slam hopes, you hope that the elite prospect is there at number 1, right? Whether it's a quarterback or not, you want an awesome game changer, culture changer, all the things that Mike Borgonzi, I thought, articulated well in that article we read several weeks ago, right? And it was Albert Breer that did the article. He had some really good quotes saying the number 1 pick in the draft is supposed to change the culture of your franchise. He is a guy that's a leader. He's going to carry people with him into the fight. And he was talking about whether that's a quarterback or not. So I think that's the central question.
That quote, by the way, from Mike Borgonzi to Albert Breer, quote, "This pick, when we're picking this high, this guy should drive the culture. It's like, this is the type of guy we're looking for. When you make a pick this high, you don't want to just get enamored by the talent you see on film. That's part of the process. The other part is making sure that that person fits the culture and he's going to drive the culture too."
Yes.
That's an important
And
part of it.
it goes back to
And so
this.
that's the dilemma,
Mhm.
right? Is, hey, we need a quarterback, and Cam Ward is a good quarterback prospect. I
Mhm.
think we all can agree on that. But is he the guy that's described in those quotes?
Yeah, I like the last part, which was interesting, what Borgonzi said. Looking at the talent and being so enamored by the talent that you may gloss over some of these other areas that are really important as well. But you look at the talent, and you say, man, this talent is off the charts. I hadn't seen anything like this in a while. So when he talks about drafting a guy at that number one spot, and he needs to be a culture leading type of player, a tone setter within your locker room. He's not just talking about the play on the field, because a lot of guys can be all world, and I've seen it, but they don't move the needle when it comes to being a leader in the locker room or showing that ability to, get people to want to follow you in such a way that no matter what happens, if you're down 10, 15, 21 points, those guys are looking at you. I played with a guy like that. Matter of fact, I played with two of them here, Steve and Eddie. Those guys, were the numbers gaudy? No, not really. Eddie was great. I mean, Steve's numbers were not gaudy other than the MVP year, but it wasn't just about the play on the field. It was what they did and how they led, and what we as guys in that locker room, what we saw week in and week out. And we knew if he can do it, damn it, we can do it too.
615-737-1025. Let us know on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Are we underrating Cam Ward because of the discourse around this quarterback class as a whole? 615-737-1025. It's time for the 4th annual 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament. Cromwell Media, along with partners Fox 17, Outfront Media, and Social Indoor, are proud to announce we will be back at Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, May 29th, to make a difference while having a great time. You can join us and a few guest media members, athletes, and musicians as we raise money for Folds of Honor. Donations will go to provide life-changing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled military and first responders. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com.
All right, let's talk Loan Pronto. Remember, Loan Pronto can get you cash in a short period of time in a very efficient way. If you are looking to try and get money to fund something that you need to fund for, well, what could those be? It could be a home improvement project. It could be to pay off a credit card bill or two. Maybe it's a car loan that you want to knock off and it's got a high interest payment, and every month you're paying more interest than you want to, and you could become in a better financial spot. Well, the average homeowner has lots of money in equity. If you're a homeowner, especially in our listening area, your home's valuable. So that's your money. You can use it as you see fit. And Loan Pronto has several ways to access that cash quickly from your home with no paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, often no appraisal. You can make one phone call and get this process started. You can get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull. Go to 615, or excuse me, pick up your phone, call 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com and get the money you need. That's loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
what's coming in this building, you want to see Mario Cristobal like melt. It's bringing in a transfer from Washington State who started an incarnate word, who comes in and changes the absolute culture of this entire organization, if you will. The entire program changed when he walked in that door. His commitment to excellence is what it needs to be elite. His work ethic, it's not just the work ethic, it's the demand he puts on you.
Right.
As a teammate. That stuff's real. That stuff matters. And I think that that's a big part of why he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. He's a culture-changing type of leader with an elite release quickness, very strong arm, good overall accuracy as a passer, can drill some stuff in and become even better. His decision-making is overly aggressive at times. It's questionable at times. You want to rip your hair out with some of the stuff he does, okay? Won't get away with it in the NFL. Same with Patrick Mahomes coming out. Same with Josh Allen coming out. I promise you. The instincts, the twitch, the off-platform, the ability to create magic is that additional stuff.
That was Todd McShay talking about Cam Ward, and we were just talking about the culture aspect of it, right? Driving the culture. And Todd McShay on his podcast was touching on those very things, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, the play is what it is, I think. And I think because he's been to several different universities, I think that people do hold that against him for whatever reason. But I'm sure people look at it as a positive too. Like, he was able to go to these, different universities, started at Incarnate Word, and then found himself at the end at the University of Miami. And they talked about, Cristobal raves about, his ability to get guys to follow him, his ability to command the locker room, the huddle, but also his ability to know everybody in the building, to make friends with everybody in the building. He's that type of guy. That's the type of leader that you want. And then you hear Todd McShay talk about some of the intangibles that he has. And he's right. They talked about, why do you think Patrick Mahomes wasn't drafted, in the top 2 or 3? Because the numbers were there, but because of some of those, aggressive type throws, some of those throws that they said you won't be able to get away with that in the NFL. He talked about Josh Allen, same thing, guys that are aggressive with the football. Oh, he won't be able to get away with that in the NFL. But what happens? You develop as a quarterback. Even the Patrick Mahomes, they said he wouldn't get away with him. He's gotten away with just about everything he's been able to. And he was doing this in college. So he's one of those guys that has been able. Caleb Williams, to a certain extent, has been able to get away with it somewhat, but it also has come to bite him. But he has to develop into, how do I do this? How do I be calculated when I do it? That's what Patrick has found out. That's what Josh Allen has found out. So, yeah, you may look at these things about Cam Ward and you say, man, those are some aggressive throws. Man, he maybe, but you do believe that he can develop out of that, as Patrick Mahomes did and as Josh Allen did.
So, Willie, the question we're asking each other and all of you at 615-737-1025, are we underrating Cam Ward because of the discourse around this quarterback class? And speaking of Todd McShay put together his quarterback draft tiers. He combined last year's quarterback draft class with this year's quarterback draft class and put them in tiers. So tier 1, this was Todd McShay. Tier 1, elite prospects should be day 1 starters and project as future all-pro caliber players. He had 3 quarterbacks: Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May. I don't think any of us would argue with that. Tier 2, notch below elite, immediate impact players and eventual high-end starters worthy of a top 15 pick regardless of class. J.J. McCarthy last year and Cam Ward. He has the same grade on those 2 players, a 92. Tier 3, immediate contributors who should quickly develop into starting caliber players, considered quality values in the bottom half of round 1 in any given draft class. Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Shedeur Sanders, and Jackson Dart. So those are Todd McShay's top 3 tiers for the quarterback classes combined last year and this year.
It's compelling stuff. And it goes to show you the process of evaluation and how it continues to evolve as more information comes out there. Because I swear, am I remembering this wrong? That it was Sanders and Ward for a long time before it is, there's been some separation.
I think it was around the time of the combine, right? Where
Yes.
it started to feel, although neither of them performed at the combine, I felt like it was at the combine where people who were there started saying there's some separation building between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. So that's been what, about a month, right? It did feel like,
and if you could go back to the regular season, I remember Deion Sanders. I think it was maybe around bowl season, something like that. He did some kind of thing with Antonio Pierce, and it was kind of off the record, but it was on tape. And they were joking, right? Hey, the Raiders might get the first pick, huh? Wink, wink. Like there was a lot of open talk, and Deion certainly didn't shy away from it. That hey, my son's going to be right up there at the top of the draft. And he probably had some reason to believe that was true at the time, but it does evolve. And so I'm guessing that these evaluations are a little bit more homework. There's more data involved, but I still am sitting there going, wow, Cam Ward's stock has risen a lot since the end of the football season. And so is that real? Right? I still a little hesitant, but I know in the big picture it is really hard to know that you've got the right guy. You can't know as much as you feel like you've done your homework and you think he's the right guy. You just don't know.
I think it has a little bit possibly to do with the team that is drafting number 1. And everybody knows that they need a quarterback, meaning the Tennessee Titans. So I don't think it's so much that maybe Cam Ward is just, exploding up the draft chart. I think it's based upon the team that is drafting in their need and how they've approached Cam Ward. They probably at the beginning thought that this was probably a 2-horse race, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And we like both of them, but we're going to have to get more information. And as they started to get more information, it's just because we are in a position to draft a quarterback number 1, he is coming out more and more to be the type of guy that we want to lead our franchise. But it may not be that way with the Cleveland Browns, the Giants, teams like that need quarterbacks. They probably still look at it as, well, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers, maybe Tyler Hugh. That's who I was thinking of, Tyler Hugh. Out of Louisville. Is it Hugh or Shoe?
It's Shuck.
Shuck.
It looks
man.
like
Shoe.
Shoe or Shaw, but it's Shuck.
Yeah, Shuck. So
don't ask me to explain.
Yeah, I won't even do that to you. But I think maybe other teams have a different sort of big board than what the Titans have in regards to how they rank Cam Ward amongst not just the quarterbacks, not amongst just the other players, but really amongst the quarterback. And would they be justified, or would it be good if they drafted? Do they believe they will not go wrong by drafting Cam Ward?
Robert is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Robert, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hey, Ding Mace, how you doing, Bob?
Hey, you're doing well.
Hey, I got just a real quick question on this draft. I know it's, the first thing I want to ask you, have you ever seen a draft this freaking ugly? I mean, it's just, there ain't nothing out there. And then my second question is, do you think, I just don't think Ward's worthy of a first-round pick. And is there anybody out there that'll put together a package maybe where we could trade that first-round pick? And I'll hang up and listen to y'all off the phone, man. Love on you people.
Thanks for the call,
Appreciate
Robert.
it.
So we alluded to this earlier. The Browns GM, Andrew Berry, said at the league meetings that it appears unlikely that the Browns are going to make a trade up one spot.
Mhm.
He said, quote, "At this point in the process, anything is possible. Candidly, I wouldn't necessarily see that as likely. There are a number of players that we like in this draft relatively high, but I think as we come to really the end of March, first week of April, we're coming down the home stretch, so to speak, about probably the player assessment phase of the draft process. And then as we really get into the month of April, that's when we really dive into strategy." So again, as Willie said, you have to take all of these things with a grain of salt. But it appears that the Browns are maybe pumping the brakes on a potential move up one spot. The Giants also seem to suggest today that they may not want to move up as well. So again, grain of salt. But the teams that we've been talking about who could make that move may be taking themselves out of it for now.
Yeah, I mean, listen. Okay,
But you had
let
Rappaport
me
just then saying that there would be several teams
that are willing.
that could be interested, right?
Yes.
But
Several.
listen, it's going to continue to fluctuate. It's
Not
gonna continue
one,
to go.
not a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, several.
Several.
But as we get closer and closer to the draft, it would either swing completely one way, or completely the other. When we talk about teams potentially moving up, to that number one pick, or the Titans changing their price on what it would cost to move up to that number one spot. But to go to the caller's question, as far as this draft not being a good draft and the Titans moving out of the number one pick because Cam Ward, in his mind, he doesn't believe it's worthy of the number one pick. I'm not sure if he really meant a first round pick. I think he was just saying the number one pick. And again, this is the sentiment that we've heard, periodically, or we've heard at one point, a lot at the beginning. Cam Ward's not worth the number one pick. Cam Ward's not worth the number one pick. Listen, if the Tennessee Titans believe he is worth the number one pick, then draft him. What was the stat Tim Hasselbeck, or the quarterback that Tim Hasselbeck threw in there?
Yeah,
From
Andy
Cincinnati,
Dalton.
Andy Dalton. Look at Andy Dalton's 8 years in Cincinnati, and he really didn't have any. They really didn't have any talent other than, I think, AJ Green.
AJ Green.
That's it. They didn't have much talent, and
But they
he
had
was
a double-digit win run for
exactly
a while with him in there.
Exactly, and his numbers were good numbers. They were good numbers. So if you can get that Tennessee Titans for 10 years and build your team around him, and you getting double-digit wins, and you may go on a long run a few times within the playoffs, and you may just reach the Super Bowl. But let's just say the play in general, Andy Dalton's play.
By the way, his first 5 seasons in the NFL, remember, there were 16 games at this point. 9 wins, 10 wins, 11 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins. That was Andy Dalton's record
with him underneath center
for the first 5 seasons of his career.
And we know they don't like spending money, okay? Cincinnati, at least they did back then. They do now. So if you had that, if you were going to get Cam Ward, if you're going to get AJ Dalton at the number one pick, would you take it? That's what fans, because I think
most fans would say no, to be honest.
Because you know why? Fans think that
expectation.
Exactly. They want Jayden Daniels. They want one of these they want a Peyton Manning. They want a Patrick Mahomes. Well, Patrick Mahomes didn't get drafted number one.
615.
Right, so you don't know.
Exactly.
That's the other thing. Like, this is, if you know it's Andy Dalton, then I think most fans would probably vote, hey, that's not worth the one pick. The other part of the equation that is very unknown, very murky right now, but I'm sure the Titans have probably gone down this road as best they can, is evaluating the quarterbacks that are coming into next year's draft, right? Is next year's draft supposed to be more loaded with quarterbacks than this year's draft? That's something to consider.
615-737-1025. We will take your thoughts on the Titans' decision at number one overall, and you can also continue to answer the question, are we underrating Cam Ward because of the discourse around this quarterback class? 615-737-1025. But coming up next, oh boy, we got to talk about the Vols, man. It was a rough one yesterday for Tennessee. We will get to that next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Before we get to our Vols conversation, Titans Jones is on our phone line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com, wants to talk about the number 1 overall pick. Titans Jones, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Man, yeah, no worries, man. I know y'all needed help, so I called in so I can help y'all out.
Appreciate it.
Nah, I'm just playing with you. Look, this is my question, man. I really feel like the Titans need to sacrifice the number 1 overall pick. Like, I think they need to trade back, man, because I feel like right now you don't really know if a guy is actually the guy. Because let's be honest, 2 years ago you drafted a guy in the second round as a quarterback. Now you're finna draft another guy as a quarterback, and 2 years from now you might be drafting another guy. Man, just sacrifice it. Trade back, roll with the punches one more year with Levis. And let's be honest, who actually want to sit there and watch Will Levis play? But we might have to just roll with the punches and build a whole, you know what I'm saying? Because ain't no telling what we really can get for this number 1 overall pick. But I'm going to hang up and I'm going to listen.
Thanks, Titans Jones. When we wonder if he named himself Titans Jones or if that nickname was bestowed upon him, I should have asked that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Titans Jones, for
It's
not
a cool
asking.
name. I like it, though.
I prefer Osmosis Jones. Remember
TJ.
that movie when
Yeah.
we were younger?
Great movie.
Willie, Osmosis Jones, does that ring a bell?
No, it does
Okay.
not.
Shout out Bill Murray.
It was like half animated, half live action. Chris Rock, Bill Murray, David Hyde Pierce. It's a gross movie. It's like a gross out. Whatever. Point being, we
I
watched
feel like
it.
I'm a movie buff, but I have not heard of that one.
You are quite the movie buff. I mean, you did break my heart when you said you weren't into Inspector Gadget last week. I thought that was right up your alley.
Wah, wah, wah.
But look, and not to dismiss Titans Jones' question. Look,
I did get a very animated text from a listener who came up with a meme to express his frustration with me not liking Inspector Gadget, who came up with a gadget move and made a gesture at me that we cannot really, well, let's just say he gave me the 1 gun salute.
I think I saw that. I think I saw
Yeah.
that same.
Inspector Gadget gave me a 1 gun salute for not liking it.
Rude.
How rude.
Just so
Use your
rude.
words.
and
Just
not
so rude.
to disregard Titans Jones' question.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who feel that way about trading back and rolling with Will Levis one more season, and maybe you'll be back in that position next year. Nothing is guaranteed. We will continue to have this conversation, but I do want to shift gears to yesterday's Elite Eight. You may have heard this once or twice or 800 times over the past 12 or so hours, but the Final Four has all number 1 seats for the first time in nearly 20 years, which means that Tennessee, unfortunately, did not break its curse, did not make its first Final Four. The Volunteers lose 69-50 to Houston yesterday at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. 15 points the Vols scored in the first half of the game. It was the worst first half for a team seeded number 1 or number 2 in NCAA tournament history, regardless of round. The previous record was 11 points. Oh, I'm sorry. That's wrong. No, that is right. Okay, I'm all confused here. Worst first half for a first team seeded number 1 or number 2 in NCAA history. The second worst overall scoring half for a top 2 seed, with Kentucky's 11 points against Georgetown in the national semis in 1984.
Oh,
The
what a
only-
goal game that
Brutal.
was.
The only worst performance
that game.
There, I spit it out. Point being, 15 points for the Vols in the first half. Their top 3 scorers, Zakai Ziegler, Chaz Lanier, and Jordan Gainey in the first half, a combined 4 of 22 from the field, 1 of 13 from 3. The game was over almost as soon as it started. And I was a little late to turning it on. I believe the score when I turned it on was 15-4. And I was like, this isn't good. And to the Vols' credit, Willie, they did battle back in the second half, did cut it to, I believe, as low as 10 at one point in the second half, but then Houston just turned it back on. I mean, the Vols were never competitive in this game, and it's a rough end to what could have been a national championship season for the Vols.
It's too bad for Tennessee because it was the way that they lost. It's not that they lost, because I think we have to understand that even though Houston is not in the SEC, and Houston for a long time was not in the power conferences, right? They're just now in the Big 12, even though they've had really good teams for a while. But after the Phi Slamma Jamma era of the 80s, right, where they were perennially, they had Akeem and they had all those great players, Clyde Drexler, all those guys, they kind of went into oblivion. You know, they were out of sight, out of mind for decades. But in the recent years, they're really good. Like I was blown away. I think I was guilty of probably underselling how good Houston was, particularly on defense. They absolutely shut down Zakai Ziegler. I have not seen that all year long. And really, Zakai Ziegler's been playing for 4 years for Tennessee. I don't know that I've ever seen him completely neutralized like they neutralized him. In fact, in the second half, when Tennessee was starting to try to make a run and creep up a little closer, and you're thinking, okay, another, they missed a couple free throws, right? There was the one play where Meshack put it up. It looked like it was an and one. And then they decided it wasn't goaltending. So he shoots 2 free throws instead of shooting 1 for a 3-point play, and he misses both free throws. So that's the kind of thing that was happening to Tennessee. They didn't play their best. But, man, Houston's awfully good. That being said, man, when you can't buy a bucket, how often do we say it all year long? That's the one Achilles heel that Tennessee has. They can have a day like that. They've had a couple of them before. The 2 games against Kentucky come to mind in the regular season, and that is ultimately what ended their season.
When you're playing against Houston, you're playing against a smothering defense. That's what you're playing against. You're playing against a team, but not only can we, because their defensive efficiency was second in the country during the season.
Yep. Those were the 2 best defenses in the country.
Exactly.
Tennessee and Houston.
Exactly. And then what you're able to see throughout this tournament, they've been the number 1 team when it comes to defensive efficiency in this year's tournament. So you say, all of that coming into the game. This is where and we've been talking about this forever. This is where UT gets in trouble. And I know every team does. A lot of teams play, this sort of, screen type of, 2-man basketball. But I think UT get into certain situations where they're playing too much 2-man basketball, and the other guys on the other side of the court just standing there. That happens too many times for UT. And I said, in order for UT to get out of this and ultimately find themselves in a championship game, Chaz Lanier had to up his game. The last 2 games he played have been horrendous from the 3-point line. The last 5 games he's played, 2 of the 3 losses, he shot 20% or less from the 3-point line. He was 16.7 against Houston. He was 16.7 against UK. Luckily, other guys stepped up.
3 for 18 total over those 2 games after going 4 for 5 against UCLA.
Exactly. So you're talking, and the only reason I bring it up because he's their best shooter. He is their best, hands down. He's the best shooter. And when your best shooter isn't having a good night, somebody else got to pick up the pace. But no one else picked up the pace. Gainey showed that he had some dog in him. Zakai Ziegler, as good as he is, he went up against a team that plays defense better than they do. And when you are an undersized guard and you can't get your shot off amongst those trees and they're playing tough defense, that's why they were able to neutralize Zakai Ziegler, because he couldn't penetrate to the basket like he usually do. He couldn't get his shot off unless it was 2 steps behind the 3-point line. Why? Because those long bodies were up on him. And when they drove him to the basket, you saw a bunch of big oaks in there. And he couldn't do anything with that. And when that's not working, coupled with Chaz Lanier not having a good game, They don't know where they're getting their scoring from. Meshack is not going to give them to it consistently. Again, Gainey tried to do what he could, but the other guys around him didn't pick up the shot. They didn't get anything from the inside. They had no inside presence.
Well,
UT,
that's the
none
other thing
whatsoever.
that I thought was interesting is that there are times where Felix Opara will get 3, 4, sometimes more dunks.
How
just
tall
because
is he taller than 6'11"? Is he 6'10"?
Okpara is 6'11".
Man,
he is
plays
listed
like
as 6'11".
he plays like he's 6'8" sometimes.
And there are times where he has good numbers because he knows how to hang around the basket. He sets the screens. He gets his spacing. And as Ziegler or sometimes Gainey, sometimes even Milicic, but usually it's Gainey or Ziegler, when they penetrate and they draw some coverage, Meshack is there for the lob, right? It's a kind of in vogue play now on the pick and roll. You just drive the coverage to you, and as soon as a guy helps off a big man, you lob it up to the big man. Like Cooper Flagg's really good at delivering that pass, and Duke gets 3 or 4 dunks. That's how Meshack usually gets his offense. I saw a couple plays yesterday where they tried to throw it up to him, but the defense was so good for Houston, they recover and leap up and break up the lob pass. I was really impressed with Houston's defense. I have not seen a team guard Tennessee that way all year long. But you hit on it, D-Mace. They just didn't have answers because Ziegler was neutralized. Lanier wasn't shooting it well. Opara wasn't getting his couple of buckets that he gets around the basket. And now you're down to Gainey, who they basically had to run the offense through in the second half because he was the only guy really creating anything. Milicic was a non-factor, which is we talked about him throughout the year. He can look really good on certain nights, and he can not look so good certain nights. That's a game where they needed everybody pulling the rope to have a chance, and Houston just didn't let him. Houston had a lot to do with that, though. I was so impressed. Did you guys hear the stat? Steve Lapis threw this out a number of times. In hockey, Adam, you will appreciate this. Their hockey record this year would have been 34-1-3. They only lost 1 game in regulation all year long, and that was November 9th to Auburn by 5. Nobody has beaten them without going to overtime since, and nobody's beaten them, period, since February 4th. So I think they're probably a bigger buzzsaw than we realized.
The way that this game played out to me, and I remember Jay Billis when he was making his predictions for the tournament. He predicted a Tennessee Houston Elite Eight, and he wrote that 3 Navy SEALs are going to have to officiate this game because of how physical these two teams are. And the way yesterday's game played out to me is Tennessee, imagine the bully at school, right? He's stuffing kids in lockers and stealing lunch money and all of that stuff. And then a slightly bigger bully shows up, a few inches taller, a little bit meaner, and he punches the other bully in the face. And Tennessee, as the established bully, sees his own blood for the first time and freaks the F out. That's kind of what I felt like with Tennessee yesterday. They played a team that plays a game quite similarly to them and is a smidge tougher, a smidge more talented, and they did not know how to react to it.
I think that's a great point. I felt the same way. I was like, man, I have not seen a team just flat out tough Tennessee, because Tennessee is tough. That's their best attribute. I saw a team in Houston that was tougher. And the other thing is, you look at Houston stats, they have a couple more better shooters. They're shooters from the outside. I would say, I'll take Lanier as a catch and shoot guy over most people in the country. He's really, really good at that. But Houston's got 3 guys that average well over 40% from 3, which is really good. Now that they've moved the line back, over that many guys shooting over 40, that's elite shooting. And they hit. Remember, late in the game, Tennessee still has a heartbeat. They're at down 8, 8 with the ball. They never could really get it close. But then all of a sudden, I think Houston had a stretch where they hit 3 straight threes, and that was like, that's it. It's over.
Yes, despite the fact that Tennessee did make it a game, They still lost by 19 points, which they were
Right.
trailing
Because
by
that
a
late
halftime.
barrage of threes made it like that.
Yes.
Well, if they shoot better from the outside, I think it's a different game. Houston, they were just the more physical team, and they exerted their will over a team that has done that repeatedly to individuals. Look at what UT was able to do to Kentucky. UT exerted their will over Kentucky. They just physically they were better than Kentucky. They were not able to do that against Houston. And UT's played against a lot of physical teams. And I think this is, maybe this hurt them because it had been so physical that you got a team like the Cougars that, maybe they don't play in an as physical conference as you, but they can play that brand of ball, and you just probably was worn out because, again, that first half, it was uncharacteristic of a UT team. Guys looked tired. Guys wasn't fighting through screens. Guys wasn't trying to, really get the ball the way that they had normally did in the games prior. So maybe, just maybe, what I thought was going to happen to a lot of these teams, I thought it was going to happen at Florida, not Florida, but Auburn, but it didn't. Because of the wear and tear of the SEC, I thought some of these SEC teams would fall out very quickly, but it didn't happen that way. But that's what I saw in that first half. Now, the second half, they came back and they played more of their brand of basketball, but they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. They couldn't do anything, but they got back to playing because at one point, Houston had one turnover. And that was headed into the second half. As they were in the second half, one turnover to Tennessee's, I think, like 6 or 7, maybe even.
And I remember Houston had an opportunity at the end of the first half. They missed the shot, grabbed the rebound, and then threw the ball away, right? That was the turnover, I think, right?
I think so. But they end up, the game with not many turnovers. They had more turnovers in the last 2 minutes of the game than they had prior to that. So you're going against a team that is playing more physical to you, and they're not turning the basketball over, all while you are turning the basketball over. It just looked like a depleted, worn out team in the first half. Second half, they came back and they played a lot better, but they had dug themselves such a hole in the first half that because of their poor shooting from outside, they couldn't climb out of it.
6-1-5.
You know what else I think is worth mentioning is how close Purdue came to beating Houston, which seems even more impressive as we sit here today after they just shredded Tennessee yesterday, because Purdue fought from behind. They weren't as far behind as Tennessee, but they trailed most of the game. And they had the huge crowd, right? Tennessee had a big crowd advantage yesterday. Like Houston, that's pretty impressive to beat Purdue in Indianapolis and then beat Tennessee, with Tennessee having the number of fans that they had there. And they would have had the same thing if they played Kentucky. But Purdue snuck in there, ties the game. They tied the game with, 3 seconds left. And Houston runs a great inbounds pass and gets a dunk basically at the buzzer, which stunned me to give up that kind of shot in that situation. I was surprised that Purdue allowed that to happen, but Purdue was right there. But Houston's got to be sitting there even more, feeling more strong about themselves, because where's the Final Four?
San Antonio.
So they're now going to have an opportunity to have a lot more percentage of the fans there.
615-737-1025. The Final Four set: Houston versus Duke, Florida versus Auburn on Saturday. 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on the end of the Vol season. And now it's time to ask the central question about the University of Tennessee men's basketball program. We'll do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. This week's Nashville's best deal comes from Bad Axe Throw in Nashville, downtown's largest axe throwing venue and your go-to spot for food, fun, and vibes. Enjoy panoramic views of the city, a killer soundtrack, craft cocktails from the full bar, and a Northwoods-inspired menu with a southern twist. This week, score half off a $50 gift card while supplies last. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals and grab yours now. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Donick in Philadelphia with the Nashville Predators and
A depleted Nashville Predators roster. By
Colton
the way. I don't know if you saw
Sissons.
that.
Colton Sissons week to week with an injury. Jonathan Marchessault day to day with an injury. This is a big game for the tank. For those of you who want the Predators to have the best draft odds, this is a big game for the tank because the Flyers have been struggling mightily. Fired John Tortorella late last week, but that game starts at 6:00. Pregame at 5 right here on 102.5, 106.3 the game.
Yeah,
So,
and
yep, go
just
ahead.
another note along those lines, a very big win for the Buffalo Sabres yesterday over the Washington Capitals. Not one that you were counting on if you are a Predator fan who is maybe looking to take advantage of the season and have a high first-round pick. And every game that the Sabres and the Flyers win is a little more cushion for Nashville to be able to keep playing. You know, you want to play well. And you want to win as many as you're allowed to win, but you would rather not leapfrog anybody.
So
right? That's the perfect storm. Right.
Yes.
And so if the Kraken win, if the Sabres win, if the Flyers win, that gives you the ability to do that.
I think, Willie, what you're saying is that the Predators can play every game like they played against the Blues late last week and lose in
Vegas.
regulation.
In Vegas.
Yeah.
I thought like they played very well against two teams that are among the hottest teams in the league. Vegas is not only a really good team, but they're playing awesome right now. They've won 6 in a row.
Yes.
The Blues are the hottest team in the NHL. They won 9 in a row. And so I thought the Predators easily could have won either or both of those games. They played toe-to-toe with them. But, you know, for the same reasons they've lost the reason they're in their position they're in, they've lost games like that all year. But they found ways to lose both of them in regulation.
So the central question a lot of people are asking about the Tennessee Volunteers basketball program after it lost once again in the Elite Eight to Houston yesterday. Dan Wolken, USA Today national columnist, and if I'm not mistaken, Willie Donick, a fellow Commodore.
He is a Commodore. That's right. Dan Wolken.
Dan Wolken tweeted this after the game yesterday. Quote, nobody at Tennessee would undo the Rick Barnes era if they could. But to not make a Final Four with some of the teams and frankly, some of the favorable draws they've had over the last 8 years is a huge gut punch. If not now, when? Because that is something that is going to continue to dog this program. The Volunteers have won 31 games all time in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. That is tied with, if I recall correctly, Xavier for the most NCAA tournament wins without a Final Four appearance. Rick Barnes has not been able to take Tennessee over that threshold. As Dan Wolken said, the Rick Barnes era of Tennessee basketball has been a smashing success other than the most important part, which was getting to the Final Four and winning a national title. And when you look at what Rick Barnes is going to have to do this offseason, he has to replace 6 seniors, and he has to replace some very important players. Sakai Ziegler, he's done. Chaz Lanier, gone. Jemai Meshack, gone. Igor Milicic, gone. Jordan Gainey, gone. He is going to have to do some impressive work. Now, to his credit, he has been able to pluck some big players out of the portal. Dalton Connect was a smash hit out of the portal. Chaz Lanier was an excellent player out of the portal, right? Mm-hmm. So he's had that success. But to me, and we'll start with Willie on this, I would be curious for your opinion. These things tend to work in cycles, right? As you all know, I'm a Duke fan. This is the first time this team, this 2025 Duke team, this is the first time I have felt like the Blue Devils have a legitimate chance to win a national title since 2019. That was the Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett year. In the 6 years in between, I know one tournament was canceled because of COVID, but even last year's team, which made it to the Elite Eight and lost to NC State, I never felt like that team was a legitimate national title contender. I thought they were a good team. I did not think they were a great team. So this thing works in cycles. So who knows the next time that the Volunteers will be this good, back-to-back Elite Eights? I'm not sure Tennessee is going to be in a position to be as good as they've been these past couple of years. And that's the question that Vols fans have, and I have for you. I'll start with Willie. I mean, what do you feel that this Volunteers team was Tennessee's best shot for the near future to win a national title?
Well, I think it's interesting that you have this conversation today because I stand by what I said about Houston. I think they just ran into a great team in Houston. I think last year, I think Tennessee's team was better last year, but they ran into Purdue.
But if you want to be a great team, you have to beat other great teams, which they have not been able to do.
Yes, and it's unfortunate. And I think the way to do that is just keep getting in there and putting yourself in that position every year, and sooner or later, it works out. The favorable draw thing that Dan talked about, I'm not really sure what he's talking about because I
think he's talking about some of the other teams that they've lost to in lower seeded games.
I guess you're going back more than 2 years because I just didn't think it was, hey, they should have beaten Purdue or they should have beaten Houston. It's disappointing that they didn't, but those were really good teams.
Well, they lost to the year they beat Duke in the second round, which was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Didn't they lose to Florida Atlantic in the Sweet 16?
I think that sounds right. Now but that Tennessee team, I think, was one of the weakest. They had really gotten lost. I think early in the year there was a lot of hype on that team. If I'm remembering this correctly, they were number 1 in the country around January, mid-January, and then they sagged a little bit. And I remember asking this question to their fans who were really devastated. When they were at a low point, if I had told them you're going to recover from these struggles and you're going to get to the Sweet 16 and beat Duke to get to the Sweet 16 and then lose, would you take it? Like, I think a lot of people on, I don't know, February 28th or March 1st might have taken that. But I get the overall point is you'd think with all these really good teams that they've had that there would have been a breakthrough to get to the Final Four. And there hasn't been. But I still think that's really, really good work by Rick Barnes. And let me give you this too. I think it matters how you conduct yourself. And I think Rick Barnes is a pretty classy coach who is likable. Me as a Vanderbilt, graduate player, it's hard for me to not like what Rick Barnes is about. I'm a rival of Tennessee, but I think Tennessee carries themselves with class. Zakai Ziegler is a classy leader, tough, hard-nosed player. I like how Tennessee builds their teams, and they don't always, it doesn't always work out. There are really good teams throughout history that it's hard to win with. It's just one game. You got to win that many. It seems easier than it is.
Well, look, I don't know if this is Tennessee's because of the portal and guys transferring. It seems like every semester. I am not gonna say, well, that window was closed. UT, you will not see them in an Elite Eight or Final Four for the next 6-7 years. No, they can find themselves. They go out and get them, a shooter and add somebody else. They can find themselves in this same situation or even better next year. But what I will say is this: Rick Barnes has had 2 opportunities to capture a national championship with a damn good team. We're talking about the 17-18 team and the 18-19 team with Williams and Schofield and Bone and all those guys, and they reached the Sweet 16. They didn't advance out of the field of 32 the previous year. Then they got to Sweet 16 and lost. Then there was a COVID year. I think Sweet 16 they lost to Purdue. Was it Purdue that year? It was a Big Ten team. I know that. It might have been Purdue.
Purdue beat them in the Sweet 16
yes.
in overtime
in 18-19.
Yeah, with
that was
Carson
18,
Edwards.
That was 18-19.
That was a heck of a game.
Yeah, that
too.
was a heck of a game.
The performance by Purdue in that game was pretty amazing.
Exactly. So you had an opportunity 17, 18, 18, and 19, and you did it, and it slipped right through your hands. And then you fast forward and you look at 23-24 and 24-25, where you had another opportunity, I believe, albeit I don't think this team was as deep as last year's team.
I think last year's team, of course, had Dalton Connect
Exactly.
to carry it. This team, I felt it took a more of a collective effort to
Yeah.
get where they were.
So I don't think this team was as good as last year's team, but yet and still, the way you play defense gave you an opportunity to win each and every game. So much so you only lost 8 games overall, 6 games within the toughest conference in all of college basketball. Last year, you lost only 4 games.
They were the number 1 team in the country earlier this
Exactly.
season for multiple weeks.
So this is what I mean by those opportunities that are there. And this is why Vol fans are so frustrated probably with Rick Barnes, because he did the same exact thing in Texas, where he's a damn good coach, but his team, he can see one of the reasons why I love Izzo, other than him being, green and white through and through, is that Izzo has the ability to take a team that is not as good and take them to the Elite Eight. There's no way, the way Michigan State shot throughout the season, they shouldn't have been an Elite Eight. They shouldn't have, because they are not a good outside shooting team. They can't shoot the three-pointer to save their life. But because of the way their coach coaches them and get the most out, they find themselves in an Elite Eight. Rick Barnes hadn't been able to say that. He had a damn good team, and this team found themselves each of the last 2 years exiting, not because they wasn't good, because for whatever reason, he couldn't get them to play a full game 2 years in a row. And they found themselves. And listen, the Elite Eight is great. But what Tom Izzo say, we only hang banners. And they don't hang banners for Final Fours, Elite Eights, or Sweet 16. They hang banners for champions. Rick Barnes has to have that mentality. Not to say that he doesn't, but UT, I think the fan base understands now, hanging banners is better than going to Elite Eights or Final Fours, and that be the end of your road.
But it's important to remember as a fan, I think. Look, I'm not going to tell fan bases how they should feel, but there are hundreds of programs that would sign up for the consistent run to the tournaments and wins in the tournament that Tennessee has had. And I always like reminding Tennessee
had a championship with Cal, like, and they got tired of him.
Let's put a timeout on this conversation. We'll continue it on the other side. 615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the state of the Vols basketball program after another tough loss in the Elite Eight to Houston. Once again, Tennessee failing to reach the Final Four. 615-737-1025. Willie Darnick, Derek Mason, Adam Bingen, 1025-1063 The Game.
Let's talk Lee Company. Predators in action tonight against the Philadelphia Flyers. We'll have our radio coverage as usual, plus our TV coverage. But our radio coverage will be brought to you by Lee Company. And Lee Company has been doing some great work in the community. They've been working since 1944 to help people manage their homes with the important things. Not only the general maintenance, but the guts, the bread and butter, the air conditioning unit, the heating unit, the plumbing system, the electrical system. Those 4 systems are so important in your house, and Lee Company has a year-round plan for you to keep up with those systems. It's called the Home Maintenance Plan. You pay a monthly fee, a very small one, and you get annual checkups of those 4 systems, plus discounts on repairs. So that's the way to go. sign up for the home maintenance plan by going to leecompany.com or call 615-567-1000. leecompany.com, 615-567-1000. Get those annual checkups. But hey, if you're experiencing a breakdown, if you just need, in a crisis situation, somebody to come out and fix it, hey, you've got Lee Company's number, 615-567-1000, or go to leecompany.com. Lee Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 1025, 1063, The Game. We are proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek, let's continue our conversation about Rick Barnes.
Yeah, and Willie, I'm gonna kick it back over to you because I want you to finish your thought on it. But what I was saying is, even Coach Cal, who had been to an Elite 8 or better 7 out of the 15 years, they got tired of him because why? He was either out in the first round or the second round. the previous 3 years. And they're like, we understand how great you've even won us a championship, Coach Cal, but enough is enough. You have too many guys on this team or too many opportunities to take advantage of the talent that you have, and you haven't been able to take advantage. Now, I know Kentucky believes they invented basketball. I get that. But the University of Tennessee and their fan base, they believe now with this program where they have been over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, and even right before that, they believe now they are a basketball school. They are in the toughest conference in all of college basketball, the best conference. So this fan base is looking at these other teams ahead of them and saying, yeah, we're there with them. But Rick Barnes, you got to get us over that hump, man. Or we need to do what Kentucky did. Move on and get us somebody else.
I don't know. I don't know what the future. Rick Barnes, I believe, is coming back. He's not retiring or anything like that. But I remind the history of Kentucky basketball is very unique, as we know. Quite a bit different than the history of Tennessee basketball. But I just think that Rick Barnes, relative to other coaches at Tennessee, with very few exceptions, has done quite a bit better, more consistently for a longer time than just about anybody in Tennessee basketball history. I think, unless you want to go way back to the, I think we can say that in the 70s, they had a pretty good run. Bernard King, Bernie, and Ernie, and those years, those were pretty good teams. Different era, right? There weren't 64 teams in the tournament back then, so it was tough to judge your tournament success back then because it was harder to make the tournament. But let's even take Bruce Pearl's 6-year run, right? He did tremendous things, Bruce Pearl, but he only got to one Elite Eight. So, and there were a lot of people that petitioned to try to get Bruce Pearl back, even though he put him on probation and got a 2-year show cause, right? It was a tough fallout for Bruce Pearl, and people still long for his charisma, and he won. Rick Barnes has won more than Bruce Pearl. So I get this. I get the higher the better you do, the higher expectations get, and the hungrier your fan base gets to get to the next level. But I want to remind people that hundreds of programs would sign up for the consistency that Rick Barnes has had at Tennessee.
Yeah, and listen, I get that part. But when consistency isn't bringing you championships, or at least one championship, and I'm not advocating for him to be fired, but
hell, I would take a Final Four right now if I were a Tennessee fan.
Absolutely.
Not even the championship. Just get to the Final Four.
But I'm sure I'm sure there are Vol fans. It's not easy. I'm sure it's not easy.
Absolutely not easy.
But I'm sure Vol fans are like, listen, we've had teams that should have won national championships, and you hadn't gotten it done. And eventually it's going to come to an head where, okay, yeah, we've been good. We've been consistent. But again, it's about raising banners. It's about getting championships. If he had one championship, then okay. But Rick Barnes has none, not here nor at Texas. And I think that his Texas resume, considering a few players that he had, follows him in a bad way to UT.
Most notably Kevin Durant.
Exactly, because they see the pattern being repeated.
Right.
When you have damn good players and you can't close the deal.
I just want to say, in terms of the banners, at Memorial Gym, there's a banner for the 1990 NIT championship and the 1991 making the NCAA tournament and losing in the first round. I hope they keep those banners up there. Those are my two teams. I can say
I'm not advocating for them to take down your banners, Willie.
But I get the point, right? There's once you get to a certain level, you've won so much that you can't put a banner up there for everything. Remember all the joking the Predators got from around the league for putting up all the banners. But it's all relative to the success and the of your franchise and where you are, of how you recognize success and what is your definition of success. And going forward, now that the expectations are so high and you lose all the seniors, this is going to be a big challenge. You talked about it, Adam. as much as you take Duke, as consistent and great their tradition is, they still have some down cycles now and then. And I think this will be a great challenge for Tennessee, losing that, they got to come up with another guy out of the portal that's got the connect or even Chaz Lanier level. They need at least one of those guys, if not more than one. But they also lose the guts and heart and soul of their program, and Ziegler and Meshack and Gainey, who's been there a couple years. I mean, those guys, they had some returning guys to put around the aces that you get out of the portal. Now they're kind of have to start from scratch, right? I'm not sure who they've got coming in. I'm sure they've got a plan, and they've got a lot of money, so they'll have some good players, but it will be different next year.
I'm reminded of the banner that the Colts hung. 2014 AFC finalist. Do you remember that banner? We participated in the AFC title game. We didn't win, but we participated in it.
But it looks like, if I'm reading this correctly, and because these things change as much as I change my underwear in regards to all of these guys signing places, guys not signing places. UT, from what I'm looking at, they got 2 4-star guys coming in, shooting guard in the center, Amari Evans, the shooting guard, Dwayne Brown, the center. So they have 2 guys, and then they have another commit, but more so a 3-star point guard. So, I mean, this is what now it's going to be more imperative now than ever, because of the new rules and the transfer portal, guys opting in and out. He's gonna have to really, and they may have. They're gonna have, if he wants to win a championship as good as the SEC is getting or has become, they're gonna have to go out and start, really paying players. And I'm not saying that they haven't, because I'm sure they have.
Oh, I'm guaranteeing they have as
exactly.
good a budget as anybody.
So if Rick Barnes wants to, he has to make a serious push, and I'm sure he will, at getting, because he's gonna have to replace 4 to 5 starters.
Ziegler, Lanier, Milicic,
And Meshack,
Gainey off the
Gainey
bench.
so he was basically a starter.
He was the best 6th man in the country.
Yeah, so they got to basically replace,
to some people,
half of their team where the points came from.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who's back?
I don't know. I need to look at the squad from last year.
I mean, I'm just looking at their minutes.
Yeah.
Right. It's, I mean, I guess in theory, the big guy is back.
Okpara.
Yeah.
We'll see, but
he's a junior. But Meshack, even Dubar,
Milicic is a junior, right?
Milicic senior.
Senior this year.
Gainey, Lanier, Ziegler, they're replacing their whole team, right? Basically, other than
right.
And Okpara, who knows? I mean, people these days, Cade Phillips, I guess, is a good role player that'll be back. He's only a sophomore.
615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on Tennessee after its season ended yesterday to Houston in the Elite Eight. But coming on next, Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter. He's down in Palm Beach, Florida. Again, tough gig. We will talk to Teron Davenport about, first I'm going to ask him if the coaches actually eat breakfast at these coaches meetings, at these coaches breakfast. But we will talk to Teron Davenport about what's been going on down there. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Let's go to our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com and welcome in Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans
What's up, man?
reporter.
How you doing?
Teron Davenport down in Palm Beach, Florida. Tough gig, Teron.
Oh well, listen, man. It's never you never work a day in your life if you find a job you love. Ain't that what they say?
That is absolutely what they say. I do have one rather unserious question before I ask you serious questions about football. So I know that I know that this gathering, it's part of the league meetings. It's called the AFC Coaches Breakfast. Am I correct on that?
Yes, for today. Tomorrow's the NFC.
Okay, so it's the AFC Coaches Breakfast. Yet I never see anybody actually eating breakfast at these things. Or is anybody actually eating breakfast?
Oh yeah. There's breakfast beforehand, and then you go ahead and that way everybody's happy. You see what I'm saying? So there's no hangry people. So you fill your belly, and then you go ahead and you ask the questions, and it makes for better conversation.
All right. I feel better about this now. Okay, let's ask you the serious question. So you have a story up at ESPN.com with the headline, Titans still mulling top draft pick ahead of Colorado Pro Day, talking about how Brian Callahan said, quote, "We're open to everything at this point."
Yeah.
I'm sure you had, and other reporters there had long conversation with Brian Callahan. What's one of the other more interesting things you heard from Brian Callahan? Not just what you wrote about, something that may not have gotten into the story. What do you think that he said that you found to be particularly interesting?
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. Just the thought process with Abdul Carter. I mean, there's still interest, but the big question is the series of injuries, right? You got the shoulder, you got the foot. We've talked extensively about that. That's a question mark, and if you're using the number one overall pick, like you want to know that your guy is going to be available that you pick. I thought that was interesting. Callahan said that he had a direct talk with Will Levis, right, at locker cleanout, and he made it known that, hey, look, man, you control what you can control, but definitely understand there's going to be competition. And I thought that was something. I asked him about the quarterback room, and he talked a bit about Tim Boyle. And I mean, one of the things I walked away from that table thinking is that Brian Callahan could sell ice to an Eskimo, because he was talking about Tim Boyle and really, uplifting him and trying to find, good things about him. And he talked about Brandon Allen and his time spending with him and how that quarterback room, which, we look at it, and it's not one that I would want to go into a season as the head coach of, but, he was finding a way to get a silver lining in what they have going on.
Teron, I remember after you returned from the NFL Combine and we talked about what was your biggest takeaway, and you said that if the Titans stay at number one, they're taking Cam Ward. And,
yes, sir.
And Brian Callahan said today that the team is 2 weeks away or so from, confirming their decision as to what to do with the number one overall pick. I know that Colorado's Pro Day is later this week, and the Titans will be out there for Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. My question for you is, if the Titans are as smitten on Cam Ward as we are all led to believe, is there anything that could happen over the next 2 weeks that could change that from the Titans' perspective?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple things that could happen, right? They could get an offer they can't refuse. That's one thing for it to move down. Or you look at another thing, like Travis Hunter could have the workout of a lifetime, and they talk themselves into picking him. Or, Abdul Carter's medical could clear. I think those are the things that you're looking at. I mean, it's pretty established, and you guys know, like I'm really big on Shedeur Sanders, but it's pretty established that Cam Ward is in many eyes elevated above him. So they go quarterback, that's the option. But really, I asked Callahan that very question. If this is a guy that you really are high on and you have the pick, what are the pros and cons to telling him or making it known that that's your guy? And he just said, look, it's just due diligence. And they want to exhaust the process. And that's when he got into the whole idea of getting an offer that essentially can't be refused, or as he put, is above the value that they would keep them from picking Cam Ward, and that's kind of where they are.
TD, the question was asked of Brian Callahan about some of the injured guys. Jim Wyatt on TennesseeTitans.com. I guess he's there as well. And he brought up, Lloyd Cushenberry coming back and how he's performing. But then he brought up Treylon Burks, but he said Treylon Burks will not be ready for training camp or camp. He said training camp, but could be ready for the beginning of the season. Looking at the Titans depth chart, listen, I like Bryce Oliver, but he's still he's a young cat, and he still has to, take his lumps. And I think he'll get better. He'll develop into a guy that they can depend on. I know they went out and got Vance Jefferson, but where this room, this depth chart is looking with the wide receivers, and knowing that Treylon Burks really will not be there, you're hoping that he starts the season off, but that's a long shot as well. Do you think they address this position and they address it with more than just one pick?
Yes, I would be surprised if they come out of this thing without double dipping. And I mean, look, there's solid. So the top half of we've talked about this. Ted McMillan, Luther Burden. The top part of this draft class, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden. It's solid, but there really isn't a guy that you say, hey, top 10, I'm taking them. But you look at the depth of it. You get into your Florida guys like Elijah Badger. You get into your guys like, a Dante Thornton, the guys like a Jalen Royals. It's very easy to see them double dipping because there are guys here that could be obtained, in day 3. You know what I mean? So I would be surprised if they didn't. But don't rule out a veteran signing, from what I understand. Like, they may bring in a guy that could come in and they feel could impact and help shape the room. But there's 1,000% acknowledgement that there's, more work to be done in that receiver room.
Now, TD, there's been a little chatter about, Will Levis and what the Titans would do with him. And a lot, it has been, surrounded by trading, not necessarily him being a starter, but trading him away. The Titans hadn't put anything. The last thing I heard was they said they didn't field any calls and they have not sent out any calls on Will Levis. But would you be surprised that come draft day, especially after they make their number 1 pick, and if it is Cam Ward, that Will Levis will then be traded during the draft?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. And I think you look at this, right? We know the comments from Chad Brinker about wanting that extra pick in the top 100, right? Like wanting to be able to make all those picks in that top 100. So you look at that, it wouldn't be out of the rounds for them. Let's say you look at maybe they got 2 fourths, right? What if they were to package one of those fourths with Will Levis and send him to the Rams and move up into the 3rd round, where they don't have a pick. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's value in some way to go ahead and get one of those top 100 picks by packaging some things. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they manage to trade him. And I mean, if you look at it, right, Tim Boyle's there. You got Brandon Allen, who's clearly going to be the backup to whoever, and Levis. Do you want a quarterback room with Levis and Cam Ward in there? I don't think it would be contentious, but I mean, I would try to avoid that somewhat, so I wouldn't be surprised if they trade him.
So, Teron, with all that said, I'm curious your thoughts on the signing of Boyle, right? I think we all could kind of figure out why they liked Allen, the history with Callahan. What do they see in Boyle? That's kind of mixing back to that ice to an Eskimo statement. I mean, I don't camp arm depth. That's probably what they're looking at. But I mean, I would want, if I use a 1st round pick on a number 1 overall pick, I would want him to take as many reps as possible. So I don't know what exactly
they see, but there's something there. They made the move, and he's going to be there, for the time being.
So just insurance, I guess, is all we can say at this point.
I
Because
wouldn't even
I
call it
come back to
insurance
this.
because what does
Okay.
it insure? I wouldn't call it insurance. I would just, like I said, I think it's more of a depth thing, and I mean they're not likely to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster anyway. So, I would say a depth thing for the time being. Camp on, like I said, and that's like where it probably would be.
Yeah, it's just curious that they would bring him in before the draft. It seems like you could bring him in the day before training camp. I don't think anybody was in a rush to sign him, but we'll have to see where that goes. And so I come back to this, and D Mace, I think, kind of was throwing it out there. You hit it on to a point. But realistically, do you really believe that they could get an asset for Will Levis? Tell me, if you're the other team, what are you seeing in him? I guess like one man's trash is another man's treasure. It just takes one, right, to say, hey, here's a guy that does have some tools. Maybe I could take him to the next level, or maybe he could be a good backup for us. So what do you think that equates to as far as value in the draft, if that's where they want it to go?
Well, here's the thing, Willie. It's arrogance, right, and confidence. Look at when the Titans signed Andre Dillard. They're like, hey, look, man, this guy, even though one of the best offensive line coaches couldn't make it work, we can make it work. That was their approach. So I say that to say, you look at it, and that's why I didn't just throw the Rams out there randomly. You know what I mean? I think Sean McVay is along those lines where he's confident that he can make things work. But then you also look at, when Will Levis was coming out, I felt his measurables, his traits and everything were very similar to Matthew Stafford. Guess who's the quarterback there in with the Rams? So, obviously he's not coming in to take Stafford's job, but what better situation for him to learn from than a guy who's kind of been through a lot of the same type of bumps and ups and downs that Levis has been through. So I think all of that works in that situation to make it like, okay, you know what, that is a feasible destination. And also, we know the Rams, how they disrespect draft picks, but they could get an asset there and then also another pick. It's not a huge move down. I mean, the Rams, I think, are at 90, right, in the third round. And then the Titans are at 103 and 120 in the fourth. So we're not talking about a huge drop off. And I think getting Levis and still getting a decent pick would make that work.
The getting into the third round would be nice. My last one for you, Teron, besides the fact that I am curious if you're going to be able to sneak off and get to the Mets game. I don't know how far of a drive that is.
I'll be there.
Okay. I thought you might. You got to take care of those Marlins. Got to get some W's here. But so Teron, let's say that they get offered the offer you can't refuse, right? And they get a really good package they like for the first pick. Where do you think that leaves them? What do you think their plan would then be at quarterback? We know that they would have Boyle, Levis, in theory, and of course Allen. Is that who they might roll with for the season, or do you think they're thinking, okay, if we get that offer we can't refuse, we still have some moves we can make to bring in another placeholder?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am not exactly sure what happens there. They kind of believe and understand that this year is not going to be a good year for them regardless. So,
right.
And that's not saying they're tanking or throwing in the red flag. They understand that they're not a Super Bowl contender. I put it more that way. But look, I'll be very surprised if they don't take Cam Ward. And if it's an offer they can't refuse, 3 first-round picks, a second year, a third, all that type of stuff. Look, it is what it is. It just kind of means that, Callahan may end up being collateral damage, which is very unfortunate, but, this is the business.
Teron Davenport, ESPN, NFL Nation, Titans reporter, joining us on D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, as he does every Monday at 1 o'clock. Teron, thank you so much for taking time on what I'm sure is a gorgeous day in Florida. Enjoy that Mets-Marlins game.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I mistake. I will be at the home opener. I don't think I'm going to make it to the game today, actually, looking at the time. So,
well, enjoy the home opener then.
I thought it was the evening game, Willie. It's at 3:40, so that's not going to work.
Wait a minute. Let's see. What time is it? Okay, it starts at 6:40. p.m. Eastern time, 6:40.
Oh, I
There's
thought
hope.
it was 3. It is. There's hope. There's hope. We'll see.
There's hope.
We'll see. But if not, I'll make
Spontaneity.
it to the other one. Yeah.
Tehran, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk next week.
All
We'll
right,
have
for
to
sure.
find out
Appreciate you
tomorrow.
guys.
Yep.
Tune
Yes.
in tomorrow to see if TD got to the game.
Thank you, Tehran. Have you guys always noticed that they don't have these meetings? You know, it's like, hey, let's have the league meetings in Green Bay. Let's have the league meetings in Indianapolis. No, let's always have the league meetings in a tropical location. It's not the NFL. Other leagues do this as well. But, you know, as I said, tough gig for Tehran Davenport, who's doing great work as always. 615-737-1025. Let's react to what Tehran had to say. Coming up next, 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. We thank Teron Davenport from taking time out of his busy schedule at the league meetings in Florida to chat Titans with us. I'm also, I feel better knowing that everybody actually eats breakfasts at this meeting.
If I was at one of those things, I'd definitely eat breakfast because I'm sure the breakfast is A1.
I'm sure is it a continental breakfast? Is that what it's called at the hotel? A continental breakfast?
I guess
More than
so.
likely.
Or-
I lose track of what all these things are, but because I have been known to have to stay at a lot of hotels, of course, with my job with the Predators, where we usually stay at the hotels that don't have the breakfast. But my experience is with the travel ball, right, with a travel soccer player and a travel baseball player. We stayed at a lot of hotels that you're very interested to know with the, quote, free breakfast. And a lot of times it was the free continental breakfast.
Well, I'm telling you
What?
this right now. Where they're eating, no one else is eating. How it's set up, it's not set up anywhere else
I
in
don't
that
think
hotel.
Brian-
And I'm sure it's a great hotel too.
I don't think Brian Callahan is taking his styrofoam bowl
Yes.
and holding it under that tube of cereal
and turning it
cranking the Fruit Loops out of it like I do when I stay at these hotels.
Do you think they have an omelet bar?
Maybe they definitely don't have those like weird like wet eggs, those
Oh,
wet
yeah, no.
scrambled
Mm-mm.
eggs that are
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
there.
No,
Or
no.
the oatmeal?
It's eggs on demand.
Oh,
You
man.
order them, we'll make them.
Right, it's-
Until then,
it's
we're
an
not
omelet.
making them.
It's an omelet bar.
Exactly.
Do you make your own waffles?
Yeah.
No,
Make your own
somebody else
waffle
probably
is a
make-
fun
no.
feature for the kids, right? You pour the
No.
thing in there.
They probably be pouring the waffle stuff for you. You're not making your own waffle.
Yeah.
They don't want that
They
mess.
probably have blueberry waffles.
Well, they got all that. Believe me.
They have to have all that. Yeah.
The bread that's of questionable freshness that you put in the toaster and hope it's not moldy, that whole thing. But nevertheless, Willie, you did ask Teron an interesting question at the end. What if the Titans get an offer they can't refuse for the number 1 pick and they trade it and they don't draft a quarterback? What are they going to do at quarterback? Now, Teron said he's confident it's going to be Cam Ward, but for the purpose of this conversation, I just took a look at the free agent quarterbacks. They're all gone. I mean, the one that is still out there is Aaron Rodgers, and he's flirting with the Steelers. And by the way, Mike Tomlin today said he was quote unquote comfortable with
He's
the idea
trolling
of
y'all.
Mason Rudolph as the starting quarterback. Comfortable.
He's trolling y'all.
I don't know what kind of level of comfort he's talking about. Probably the comfort of the same beds that are at the places that we stay with the free breakfast, right? It's a different kind of comfort. But outside of that, Tim Boyle has started 5 games in the NFL. He's 0-5. Brandon Allen has started 10 games in the NFL. He's 2-8. Will Levis is the most experienced quarterback that the Titans have in terms of actual starts in the NFL. So it is an interesting question that if a team does give the Titans the offer they're looking for, what does that mean for quarterback? It likely means, Willie, it's Will Levis again.
I think you're tabling the quarterback position, and they've waited too long. And this is just the timing of it, right? They would have. I think at this point they're probably feeling like we could draft the quarterback, but if we are blown away, and it's just too good to pass up, we'll do it. They could take a remaining asset and still draft a quarterback. That's another option, right? One of the other guys that's in there at the right spot. Or just say, look, we're not, as Teron said, we know we're probably not going to be a Super Bowl contender this year. That's not anything earth-shattering. And so it's a rebuild. And we'll improve our roster. It's going to take us a couple years anyway, even if we draft the quarterback. And so we're going to go to the frontier and make do. They just have missed the opportunity to go get the next Baker Mayfield bounce back or the next Sam Darnold bounce back, etc. Right? Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle do not fit that category. You would just have to hope that somehow Levis gets way better, or you get a lower round pick that you stick in there and go, hey, this guy's not bad.
Or it's what we discussed last week about the Davis Mills path, right? You put Will Levis in there, and you're probably not going to win very many games, but it may help you be back in this position a year from now.
Listen, I think them going out and getting Brandon Allen, that wasn't, even though TD said it was for backup purposes, I think if they're drafting Cam Ward, he would be the backup. But let's say if they do get something that they can't refuse, I think the plan for them is to then make Brandon Allen the starting quarterback.
Ooh, I just got shivers down my spine
I
thinking about that.
think, again, there's a reason why they brought him here.
Yes.
He has familiarity with this offense. He was in Cincinnati. Okay, so he knows this offense. He fits, I believe, better than Will Levis. Because why? Because he's able, I think Brian Callahan believes he's able to run the offense the way it needs to be run. It may not look great, but he can run the offense efficiently. He knows 1, 2, 3. He's not 1, 2, or 1 like Will Levis is. He can run the offense. Is he under any other circumstance, a starting quarterback? Probably not. More than likely, no. But I think in this case, if they move off the number 1 pick and say they don't get a quarterback later in the first round or sometime somewhere in the second round, I think then Brandon Allen, in their mind, is their starting quarterback moving forward. Because again, they've seen the Will Levis. Unless Will Levis just blows them away and he is 180 from what he did last season. If he just blows them away, yes. But anything outside of that, I think Brian Callahan probably would be more comfortable with Brandon Allen running his team as opposed to Will Levis. Because either way, it's gonna be tough. It really is. But we've already seen the Will Levis experiment. We've seen it. And it didn't look good. And unless he comes back showing that there's no residue of last year, period, then I think if they don't draft a quarterback with that number 1 overall, if they trade out of it, then in their mind, Brandon Allen is the starter.
What do you think about what Teron said? And correct me if I'm recalling it incorrectly, about the idea of Levis and Cam Ward in the same quarterback room. How we didn't think it would lead to any sort of tension, but he has a hard time imagining that happening. Like the one question I've had about Will Levis, if he does stick around, which again, we're going to emphasize the word if, is how he is going to handle going from being the starting quarterback to the backup, if not the third string quarterback, if Brandon Allen beats him out for the backup job. I'm just curious if Will Levis has the, for lack of a better word, Willie, temperament to go from being the guy to being in the background.
Yeah, and if he didn't, they might as well cut him, right? It's just that is what's in front of them. That's your opportunity. We discussed this a lot with Treylon Burks last year. They're no longer clearing the pathway for you to run through there. You now have to run through all the obstacles in your path, if that makes sense. And if you're not cut out for that, then that's it. That's your opportunity. And the alternative is you're cut. You don't have an opportunity, or you're going somewhere else. So you're right. You have to have the right mentality. And that's just where he would be. I don't know. With the pressure off, nobody thinks you're any good. Would that mean he plays better? There are some guys that I know that are better in that situation, as opposed to the hyped up guy that has the commercials. Right now, you're the guy that has been humbled big time, and you've been made fun of, and you're like, hey, this guy's terrible. So anything you do well looks pretty good. But I still think ideally for Will Levis, if I'm Will Levis's agent, I think I might like a fresh start somewhere else where he can learn from mistakes and not be under any expectation at all.
By the way, speaking of Treylon Burks did come up in the interview with Brian Callahan at the league meetings. he said that Traylon Burks will likely not be ready for the start of camp because of a knee injury, but he could potentially be ready for the start of the season. And Derek, you and I were talking about this off air, similarly to what Willie was just saying about Will Levis. Part of me feels like the Titans should just do Traylon Burks a favor. Like, it's just getting out of Tennessee, where he will always be compared to A.J. Brown because they are linked because of the deal that the Titans made with the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, for the sake of this kid salvaging some sort of NFL career, I just think they gotta cut bait.
Well, they can't cut bait. They can't. He's hurt.
As soon as he's healthy, I guess.
And no, I don't even think, because they just don't want to release him. Again, he's not scheduled to make, 20 million
Right, he's
against
cheap,
the cap.
just like Will Levis
dirt
is cheap.
Yes, he's dirt cheap. So listen, we'll watch him rehab. We'll watch him get better. Hopefully he can, participate in some of the training camp. Hopefully he can be ready by the beginning of the season. All that hoping tells me that they are really not anticipating him contributing, at least not at the beginning of the season, because again, he's coming off an ACL injury. And usually it takes you a full year after you get back. So to me, they don't believe that he will be, at least for the beginning of the season, he will be a factor for them. So they're going to let him do what he's going to do as far as rehab. And when he's ready to go there, put him out there in practice and see, and you kind of go from there. But I think he's so far down their depth chart, or what they're thinking as far as this team moving forward, that it's like Brian Callahan said as much when he brought up on a Friday, oh, he's having surgery. Seriously? You just bringing that up as a matter of fact? Okay, interesting. But anyway, now Will Levis, I'm in agreement with TD as well as you, Willie, from this standpoint. The Chicago Bears didn't keep Justin Fields. They didn't. Not because they probably thought he was a good player, but obviously Caleb Williams they felt was better. But two, they didn't want to cause any confusion in that quarterback room. This is his job. Now, I don't all the way agree with that. I think there should be some competition. But in their mind, the competition shouldn't come from a top 10 pick of the previous year or 2 years ago. It shouldn't come from that. The competition should come from a more seasoned guy. Because listen, if we're drafting someone number one overall, this ain't about competition anymore. Now we got to move you, because we don't want this room. We don't want no contentiousness within this room. We don't want to slight our guy, not one bit. He's going to have to compete, but we want to make sure there's no ambiguity in this. He's our guy, and then we're going to have a good backup, but you're not part of the backup because you were 2 years ago solution, and it didn't work. Same thing with Will Levis. We tried it. We're drafting Cam Ward number one overall. If indeed that's what they're going to do, we don't need you to be a part of this. So I would advise, and like you said, Willie, it may just be better for Will Levis to go somewhere else to get a fresh start. Because
if you were his advisor or agent, isn't that what you would want?
Yeah, I would
to create that for him.
I will try to get him in the best situation possible outside of Nashville. I would. So, I mean, I can see, that's why I asked T that question. Like, there's not a lot of talk right now, and the Titans have put out there they haven't received any phone calls on Will Levis, and they haven't made any phone calls on behalf of trading Will Levis.
The question is, do you give him away? Do you give him away? He's super cheap, right? Let's say you make the phone calls, right? Or you say, hey, look, you're the agent D Mace, make some phone calls, see what kind of interest you get, and then call me back.
But giving away,
if nobody says they'll do anything but maybe give you a 7th or flip flop your 6th, something like that, it's a very small. Do you just keep him around, Or do you still move away from him, even though he's your asset and he's dirt cheap?
Well, no, I'm not just gonna, hey, give me your 7th-round pick. You can have him. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm more in line with what TD said. You got two 4th-round picks. You don't have a 3rd-round pick. I package one of those 4th-round picks and Will Levis. You give me a 3rd and possibly a 6th-round pick. We're good.
That's what I wonder. I wonder if you could get that kind of value. That's my question.
615-7.
If you could get that value, I'm in.
Mhm.
Sign me up.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on Will Levis, the Titans quarterback situation. You can let us know anything you want. 615-737-1025. But coming up next, we have a submission for the Captain Obvious moment of the year. It's early in the year. It's March 31st. But something was said today at the NFL league meetings that, I'm surprised it took this long for somebody to say it. And we'll get to that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company coming up next. Predators pregame at 5. Predators versus Flyers at 6. And quickly, before we get to our Captain Obvious moment of the year so far, Willie Donick, you will not be with us tomorrow because you will have the opportunity to watch your baby boy Mahoney play for Denison. I do want to point this out. If you go to Mahoney's page on DenisonBigRed.com, in the bio, it says personal, son of Aaron and Will Donick. I don't know a Will Donick. I only know a Willie Donick.
Me either.
I don't know a Will Donick.
Yeah.
Who's Will?
Who is Will?
Yeah, it's interesting. My wife Erin has always, from day one, called me Will. And then everybody that she introduces me to through her circles, they kind of know me as Will. My parents always called me Willie from birth, and so I always grew up Willie. So it's weird how that has evolved. It's not some move on my part. So I don't know how that got to the bio. Maybe Aaron filled out the bio. I don't know, or Mahoney's was thinking about mom when he wrote me down and filled out the bio. But yeah, Denison, by the way, just a little dad brag. They are the #1 ranked team in Division III baseball, and there's 400 and some odd Division III programs across the country. So it's a high level of D3, and the Big Red rolling right now. They got a really good team. So I'm hoping. He's a freshman, so he hasn't gotten in there a whole lot of games. He's pitched a couple games so far. He's really improving. He loves his velocity's gone up. He's getting in the weight room, D. Mace, and he's put on the pounds. He's getting a lot better. And I think long term he's going to have a great career there. But right now innings are tough to come by. But I'm hoping it falls right. So if anybody wants to, I can't do it. The parents, they can't call the coach and say, hey, coach, I'm coming to the game. Would you put my son in? You think that would work real well? I don't think that works.
Willie's going to be like that little league dad. Put my kid in.
Hey, here's an extra 20.
Coaches love that. Coaches love when
put my kid in.
Hey, my kid's not playing enough.
Or just start chanting.
If somebody has some sort of voodoo or some sort of power, right. Should we do that?
My homie.
So you will
sign up, put Donick in.
You will be there because the Predators are in Columbus tomorrow. So you will have the opportunity before the game to go see Mahoney play. So we will not speak to you tomorrow, but for good reason. But before we go, I want to just share this quote from Browns owner Jimmy Haslam. Browns owner Jimmy Haslam, according to Cleveland.com, admitted Monday that the club is still trying to recover from the massive failed Deshaun Watson trade. And I quote, well, I mean, let's address the elephant in the room. We took a big swing and miss with Deshaun. We thought we had the quarterback. We didn't, and we gave up a lot of draft picks to get him. So we've got to dig ourselves out of that hole. Listen, I've said this, I think, numerous times. The Deshaun Watson was an entire organization decision, and it ends with D, Haslam, and I. So hold us accountable. Well, duh.
It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out.
Also, how do you hold the owner accountable? Because
that is the question. Really. How do you hold the owner accountable? Owner, you haven't been accountable. Lower our ticket prices by 35%, and then everything's okay.
Oh my goodness, that is just
accountable.
Who else did they expect? Who else did they want to take the fall for this? The fan base. They didn't bring him over. You wanna get on Houston? No, you fell for it. It ain't Houston's fault. Fool me once. Shame on them, but it's not Houston's fault. Fool me twice. Shame on you. I'm gonna say fool you twice. Shame on you, Cleveland. You should have known what was coming along. The allegations and everything else. That backlash. You took it on, and you took it on with a smile. And now look at you.
I mean, I'm glad at least after a couple of years, for the first time, apparently, the owners have said, yeah, our bad. Oops.
Hey, Willie, have you
Here's
ever...
the thing I never understood about that trade. From the day it happened, this is what I said with the day that they did it. And it was during the NCAA tournament. That was however many years ago that was. We were sitting in a sports bar, and I said, look, they're not the first person. They're not the first team that has gone out and grabbed a guy whose stock was down because of an off-field something, right? Let's take Michael Vick. There's a lot of examples. Somebody that had an off the field incident. Maybe they were even arrested or something, something crazy. And there are a lot of teams going, we don't want that guy. But you usually get the team that creeps in there and grabs that guy, usually gets that guy at a big discount and then takes the PR hit, right? But if it works out, you're like, well, we got him. Like, look, Tyreek Hill only dropped to the 4th round because of one reason. He had a very serious domestic violence issue that made him undraftable probably by some teams. But the Chiefs said, you know what? We'll take a flyer on him in the 4th round. We'll hope that he gets his life together, learns from his mistake, and the rest is history, right?
Yeah, but
The Browns didn't do that. They
No.
spent
They
3
could've killed
first-round
someone.
picks and paid him $1 million.
Yeah, come
They-
on. Whoever did this, just confess. We promise we won't be mad.
What?
Right? But they not only they traded the farm to get him and then paid him an unprecedented amount of money. They didn't get him at a discount at all.
No.
That was the dumb part about that.
Yeah, but my thing is this. Cleveland. And Willie. Willie and Adam, have you ever seen, because this may have just been not just one of the worst acquisitions in all of football, just because of, the baggage and the accusations and the lawsuits and all that other stuff. Not just that, but he fell from grace. And I'm talking about on the football field. I'm not talking about stuff outside the football field. He was once regarded as a top 5 quarterback, maybe even top 3. How far he has fallen from that. His play, and I'm talking about his play. His play has been nothing but
He was awful.
bad.
He was awful last season.
Yes, his play has.
It's worse than
It's
Levis.
like, man, like he just forgot how to play quarterback. I've never seen this.
It's quite a fall.
Like, man, I've never
And so
seen
you
a
do
quarterback
wonder
with
if-
so much
if
talent
all of
like
the
that.
If all of the stuff around his life that
Mhm.
I still wonder if he would have been better off coming clean and saying, you know what, I made a terrible mistake and this was wrong what I did, instead of all of the legal stuff and all the time it drug out, him trying to get away from it without really paying much of a price. And I don't know how much he paid in the settlements or whatever would happen, but he never owned it, right? He never admitted he messed up. I wonder if he'd have done that, if he'd have played better. I don't know. We'll never know the answer to that question.
One of life's greatest mysteries, I suppose. But thank you, Haslam family, for telling us all week.
Thank you for Captain Obvious.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you,
And
Captain
by the way,
Obvious.
I love the Captain Obvious. I often am watching a game with my friends, and I will say to something that is said on the TV, hey, thanks, Captain Obvious.
But that will do it for us today on D Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Derek and I will be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Willie will be with his baby boy. Hopefully he gets into the game.
So just give me the vibe. Get Donick in there. Get him on the mound in game 1. preferably.
I do look forward to the local news report.
Donick.
Yeah.
Donick.
Collective thought.
Is it
Rising up into Ohio.
is it
and into the
Granville, Ohio?
mind of
Is
the
it,
coaching staff for the Big Red.
is it
Get Donick in
Granville,
it.
Ohio? Is that where?
Granville.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for the local news report from Granville, Ohio. Crazed dad storms the field after his son doesn't get into the game. Will
Kidnaps-
Donick is under arrest. We will, and I'll be like, Will, I don't know any Will, but know a Will Lee.
Yeah.
But
William Donick was just found arrested.
yes, we will.
Will Donick kidnaps pitching staff except for his son. So he has to pitch the whole game.
Celtics pride.
We will talk to you all tomorrow. Stillman and Company coming up next.
Be loved. Love your people. Love those around you. Be blessed. Have a wonderful, safe, and just exciting, even though it's gloomy outside. Enjoy your day, people. Peace.